person is very significant. So that was huge.
It's like we talked to Benny Johnson earlier this year from Bethel Church in Reading, about puzzles. When you finish a puzzle, is there one piece you're okay without being able to find it on the floor somewhere? You look hard for that last missing piece. You'll turn over the carpet. You'll look everywhere. It's the most important piece. It doesn't matter if it's the center or an edge or whatever. It drives you crazy if even one piece is missing when you're finishing a puzzle.
Yep, because it's like a discordant note on the piano, and there's no relief there.
Right.
So everybody has to show up. There is a puzzle aspect to this. Everybody has to show up. It's not, you get a corner piece, you get a key color piece. That was stuff that happened this weekend. But now everybody else we got a couple pieces of the puzzle, but it's far from done. Well, we're going to do some events that are intended to provide the opportunity for everybody else to show up and fill in the puzzle pieces in getting America back on track and to pushing these enemies out to where there's no place left for them. There's a song by, I think, Guns N' Roses. And in my mind, I hear that song and it's demons crying out, because what's the song? Where will we go now? Where will we go now? It's like somebody has died and the demons have to go find another body to possess. Where will I go now? Where will we go now? If America stands up and is counted, these demons forced out of our country, out of our land. And where will they go now? Are we going to just let them go into the swine on the hill, or are they going to hell? We're going to take our country back, but everybody has to stand up and be counted, and it could be out in flyover country, Kansas, or Nebraska, or Iowa, or Montana, or Colorado, or it could be in the middle of the densest jungles in New York and New Jersey and Los Angeles. And each one of the people has to show up. If you're called by God, you gotta show up. Whatever it is, you gotta show up. Those people that showed up this weekend, it was like they had a burning, wobble. I gotta be there. It's gonna be something with this movie. It's about children and child trafficking and pedophilia and all sorts of stuff. I gotta be there. They had a heart for it. Well, okay, they were called by God to be there, and they showed up. When your audience is called in their station, in their locale, to be present and accounted for, don't be AWOL. You know what I'm saying? And then, just to wrap it up, because I have other meetings I have to get to here, and I've got some folks that are waiting. Granted, the hot rod's fast enough to get me there, probably, but
it's not a DeLorean. It's pretty fast.
So I want to be a gentleman to get going.
But I want to tell you this also. We appreciate your time so much.
Yeah.
You're so generous, and it doesn't compartmentalize itself just to your time. You're generous with your energy. You're generous with
your finances.
We were at the nicest restaurant I might have ever been at, and normally in our situation, we're backgrounds in business, and there's often times where people scatter at the end, and we're just kind of left with the middle, and people kind of it's not a balanced out thing, and you treated us to dinner. You're generous in every single area, and there was never an ask. It was just a lopsided give. So I'm personally very thankful, but I know a lot of people are with you as well.
Well, I enjoyed that. It's like I said, that I don't think you were there. I had another private dinner before everybody showed up, and I had some of the other folks that were there privately. I think it was on Thursday night or something, and we were doing some strategy related to this. And I told the folks that showed up, because it ended up being, I think, about 50 people, but they're my heroes. All those people that showed up in the movie, you guys are my heroes. I mean, people think, I am so excited. I feel so privileged to get to be in the room and spend time with the people that are actually the people that are my heroes. You guys are my heroes because you're talking to all these people. You've got these important messages. You're doing this important work. Um, you know, I'm so excited to get to be part of it. And then I get to, break bread with you too. I mean, I don't know how many you had the night you were there. I had a couple nights where we had about 20 people in there for dinner. I think I had like 5 or 6 seatings over the few days where we all broke bread, just like your dinner that I had there. And a friend of mine's restaurant that owns that, and I think it is the best steak restaurant in Vegas. But anyway, we had just a beautiful time, and that for me was maybe a highlight of the whole weekend, just getting to hang out with the people that are doing this important work, all my heroes. And I am looking forward to, even out with the rest of the country, the stuff that's got to be done with the show with Jim and the movie, getting to rub shoulders with, be in the same room with people who are doing important work in the kingdom of God. You guys are all my heroes. I'm the beneficiary. It's just a lot of fun, And oh, by the way, okay. So I get to get flying, but I want to tell you something. So I just sent you over a couple pictures. Did you see those?
Yes, we got them, and I think we can share them to the screen here if you'd like as well.
Yeah. Do you like my bed?
Yes, your bed was beautiful.
Yeah, I had to hide the red one because everybody knew I was in town, so I was getting pulled over on the road. Hey, is that you? So
there we go. There's the silver one.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah, that one. There you go.
It's like a DeLorean.
Anyway,
better looking.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's not like a DeLorean. This actually has horsepower. That's got about
that's got
about 525
yeah.
horse. Yeah, that's actually a pretty powerful car. It's a spectacular car. In fact, I'm probably going to give it away. But anyway, the interesting thing is, people are all anxious. They're all upset. They're all excited. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? The one thing I was going to say is that, if we show up, just like you showed up at this event, there was a spirit of expectation. I have a spirit of expectation that a move of God is just around the corner. We're right on the precipice of it. The green light is about to go off, and we're going to go full pedal to the metal to do things that must be done to get the country back. There's this expectation that I think all of your listeners should have, instead of being hand-wringing like my friend was this morning, who everybody knows his first name. And what I said is, no, God's going to do something amazing here. He hasn't given up on us at all. We're these bad guys, and I do think they're bad guys. Okay, people say whatever they want. Look, when
they're the worst guys.
Well, let me just say it this way: when you rescind an order that then makes it possible for the pedophiles to stick around if they've been identified, stay here in America. If you rescind an order that pushed them out and said you can't come here, where's that an American thing? You look at all those executive orders, and so many of them are handing the country off to people overseas, etc., against the interests and best interests of the American people, the home team who paid for them. Okay?
Well, let's just be specific.
Let's
call that order what it was. And who did that? That happened Monday. Or Tuesday. The last couple of days. So I don't want to timestamp this because people can enjoy this into the future. But what was the name of the act that President Trump put in place? The Talon Act, and then that was rescinded.
Mm-hmm. Well, again,
by Joe Biden this week.
Right, and so to me, let me just say, there's certain triggers, there's certain lines in the sand that when you cross them, are you mocking God, the devil himself, and his agents, doing things that are clearly at odds with the will of God? When you cross certain lines, that becomes the final thing that then God will not look the other way. There was a certain line in the sand, and then the meteorites come for Sodom and Gomorrah. When they were having a rave, a great big huge party in Babylon, and they're all drinking and feasting and having a great time, and then the king is laughing about how he's got the Jews, he's got all of their treasure, and he calls for the utensils from the temple of God to be brought in, because they're going to drink from these utensils, the gold cups and bowls and everything else, and they're going to use them in their fetid, corrupt party, drinking and drunken rave. The king called, yeah, bring all the golden cups out from their temple. That guy, they thought he could beat us. No, come on, bring him in here. We're gonna pour the wine deeper. We're gonna piss in the cups. We're gonna do whatever we want. God can't do a thing. You know, their God isn't nothing. We are Babylon. We're king of the world. And then they get him in there. They're all doing whatever. They're drunk. They can care less about God. Who? He's not stopping us. And out of the darkness, in the middle of that candlelit rave, a white hand appears, just the hand. And the finger of God writes in the stone like it was butter, and writes some words in the stone. The handwriting on the wall. And they can't understand it. It's in a language they don't even understand. So then, while their knees are shaking because they just saw a hand as a ghost, and they saw what it did, they all saw it, and they're half sobering up while their knees are shaking, and they call for the prophet of God. And the prophet shows up, and they show him what just happened. They tell him what just happened. A hand appeared from nowhere in the midst of all of us and wrote on the wall, what does it mean? And the prophet reads it because he has the mind of God. He can hear and see what God had to say. And he says, this day the kingdom will be taken away from you, and your lives will be required. It's all over. I'm telling you, as sure as we're sitting here, they have challenged God. They've gone one step too far. They've challenged and gone against the will of God. And they've gone after the innocents, the children, and God is not mocked. God's children are not for sale. And those people that are doing that thought they could get away with it, Baal worshipers in America, Babylon in America, the day has come. God will not be mocked. This is all going down. Nobody has to say a date. Nobody has to do anything. But I can tell you, as sure as shit stinks, and it stinks to high heaven, God has smelled in his nostrils the stink of what's going on. He will not tolerate it long. And when he acts, when he strikes, when he uses his instruments, his people, his leaders that are doing stuff in his name, according to his will, he'll use a rock to bring down their monuments if he has to strike it. But he preferred to use his people, and he's about to use his people to take back this country. And some of the people know that. And if you look, it's interesting to see that what I saw over a year ago, what I wrote about in my book, the election 2020 will be an election victory the election victory will be equal to the MAGA, the Make America Great Again crowd, not squared, not to the second power, but to the third power. Election 2020 equals MAGA cubed over corn. These corn products, these farm products, you know, at the three-letter agencies when they're training their operatives to go do all the stuff that they do undercover and intelligence operations, they go to the farm. That's where they're trained. So they go to the farm and they get this, you know, training, and then go out in the world and do everything they're doing. These three-letter agency trainees have been out taking positions of authority and power all through government and across the world and in business and other places, and then doing things against the best interests of the American people. They're the corn. Election 2020 equals MAGA to the third power cubed over corn. And then on every page of my book, I had every number of every page with a cube over it, because it's all about cubed for this period. Election Victory Edition, MAGA cubed over corn. That's what's going to determine the election outcome. With that in mind, look at the imagery that I sent you from the pages from the book. Look at the book itself. Look at what's there on those various pages. And page 77, Trump victory equals, election equals MAGA cubed over corn. And what did I use? What was that cube look like? What's the color that I used there? The exact color. And then go and see, did anybody know anything? Was anybody conveying anything? Is it truly over? When Melania steps off the dress at Mar-a-Lago,
Let's go and pop up the screen on
what imagery is she using?
But look at the
Every
cubes.
single.
Orange.
Now timestamp this in a sequence for us, Juan. Did you and Melania get together and design this and put this together? Are you the consultant for fashion?
Oh, maybe God's telling us something. Maybe just like this guy comes and shows up and does a I heard from God, lightning came from space, I was struck. What's that all about?
Man, that is just crazy. That is crazy. It's exciting to see that in your book, and then to see Melania actually wearing the dress. I mean that, and it was a year apart that actually happened.
Yes. Well, I mean, again, this is about I don't know. Did they want to send a message? Was that accidental? Is that some act of God to tie things together? Did they do it for some other reason that it ends up that the same message is coming through different messengers to all of us? I don't know. Is it the coincidence of showing up at the valet parking at the exact same moment that the other guy shows up? But we already got another guy that was struck by lightning. Why didn't you tell him? Because that's not the guy that was struck by lightning. I want to tell this message. Okay? We both got struck by lightning at the same time, or different events, or whatever, and we got the same message. I don't know. I'm just telling you.
That is so much fun.
Continuity. Okay?
Wow. That is so cool.
One more time.
All right. I got folks that are waiting for me. They're beating the door down, so I've got to get going. I did longer than I should have. But I wanted to make sure we got this message all the way out for folks. And,
we appreciate it. We appreciate the formulas, things. For those of you listening, we're going to break down every single thing that he shared. We'll put it in the call notes below. Get the book. If you don't have the book, you're going to want the book. You need the book. You need it to help interpret the world that's happening around you. I think it's important to spend time in prayer. It's important time to spend with people who are in the know, to spend time in the Word of God. But when he's also working through people that are amongst us right now to share, code.
They're like little wings. They're like secrets from God. It's treasures.
This is what's happening in the world right now. You need to reach out and grab a hold of it. You're going to want the playbook of what's
Yes,
going on, so you can
definitely.
interpret these
Make
events.
sure you get this book.
The Kid by the Side of the Road.
Yep.
Get it. We'll put the link
Well, I
down below,
appreciate you guys
so
saying
check that out.
Actually,
Definitely.
the inaugural edition is the one that's coming next. That'll be out. I'm probably going to have to pause in here. We've got a few of those left, but that's about to shut down. There'll be an inaugural edition that'll have some different imagery. So if you don't get this one in time, don't sweat it. There's going to be another one shortly. I mean, it's fun to have the first edition. Second edition is just as neat. So get it now. It'll be first come, first serve here in a couple weeks when the election edition's available. And there's a few of these left, but not very many. So anyway, don't be upset if you didn't get it. The other one's very cool. It has stuff from the called and like that in it. It'll be a really cool edition too. So anyway, folks, I have got
Thank you so much, Juan.
people
We
waiting
really
for me.
appreciate your time. You have a great day. And again, thank you so much for just giving. You are such a giver. We just really appreciate it. So we just thank our listeners, too, for joining us. We just bless you. We bless you to remember that the future is brighter than your past. We bless you to remember that you are important, that your voice is important. And things that are coming up, like we talked about with the Sound of Freedom, that you being there and then sharing it with others, that it's important. And this is a great time to be alive. In fact, I think it's the best time to be alive. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Flyover Conservatives podcast with David and Stacy Whited. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave us.
Hey Kim, what's on your radar this morning?
Well, last week, when Joe Biden unveiled his vaccine mandates for all federal employees and businesses with over 100 employees, he uttered a truth that was really difficult for many of us to hear.
This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you, the people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated.
So he says right there, it's not about your freedom. It's necessary to give up your bodily freedom for the greater good, he says. Now, we're all about wanting to protect our loved ones and even ourselves, really. But when the government tells us we need to give up our bodily freedom with the government's track record, should we automatically believe them? The U.S. government has never been very good at protecting the rights of an individual to control what happens to their own body. There is a long, sordid history. Just going back to the very beginning of our nation, the most egregious control over another person was, of course, slavery. The state wasn't short of any excuses. They claimed slaves were being cared for, clothed, fed, given religion. They claimed they were better off than poor workers in northern factories. And, of course, there was the claim that it was a matter of national security because we needed cheap goods. We couldn't rely on the British or any other foreign nation. And the state has been controlling what we can ingest. With prohibition on alcohol and nowadays marijuana, we've been told it's for our own good to keep us from becoming addicts. And they would also claim that it isn't our right to be inebriated in public places. Who we can love has been regulated by the state. Interracial and gay marriage has been illegal at times in our nation's history. The excuse has always been that it's against nature, that genes shouldn't mix, or that it will corrupt the youth. People actually argued that being gay was contagious. Now, of course, a woman's right to choose has long also been under attack and still is today. Contraception was even once illegal. And, of course, abortion is currently becoming less accessible in southern states. And the excuse is always to preserve life, or in the case of contraception, to not interfere in God's plan. Now, ironically, sterilization of young women was popular in the early 1900s and even up until the 70s. And talk about interfering with God's creations. Anyone who was institutionalized or considered less than in society could undergo forced sterilization. And the justification was to protect them from having children they couldn't care for and to protect society from people breeding who shouldn't be breeding. This eugenics movement lasted for decades and mostly affected poor women of color. In fact, the 1927 SCOTUS ruling that allowed for forced sterilization was particularly egregious. In Buck versus Bell, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote in his opinion, quote, "Society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes." Jacobson versus Massachusetts. "3 generations of imbeciles are enough," he wrote. So he cited Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the Supreme Court ruling in 1905 that found mandatory vaccinations were not in violation of the Constitution. That case involved a man named Henning Jacobson who refused the vaccine, claiming that he and his son had bad reactions in the past. And as a result, he was charged $5, which was the penalty in Massachusetts for not complying. Now, he took the case to court, and he lost. The court ruled public health officials could do whatever they felt necessary to protect the public, which apparently later forced sterilization was considered part of that protection. Now, Jacobson versus Massachusetts is often being cited right now as a justification for why current vaccine mandates can hold, but we really need to put this ruling into context of the time period. I mean, we're talking about a time when women could not vote, contraception and interracial marriage were crimes, Jim Crow laws were in effect. Also at the same time, activists were trying for labor and wage reforms unsuccessfully. SCOTUS during this time was striking down laws that guaranteed minimum wage for women. They failed to uphold a law to prevent employers from demanding 60-hour work weeks, and they struck down a federal law regulating child labor. So it really, was it really the early, it was really clear in the early 1900s, and really you could from the founding of the nation and even to today, that a free country has always been about a free enterprise, not really about a free people. And when you look at all of these past and current attempts to control another person's body, you will see that the poor are the most affected. During the era of compulsory smallpox vaccination, it was pay a $5 fine, which is about equivalent to $100 today, or get the vaccine. With current vaccine mandates of measles and polio, etc. for school children, it's get your kids vaccinated or go to private or homeschool. It's a privilege of the wealthy to choose whether or not you get your kids vaccinated. And by the way, I'm just going to mention that school vaccine mandates do not exist in the UK, Canada, Australia, or Scandinavia. Unvaccinated children go to public schools in those countries. Women in Texas who can no longer get an abortion after 6 weeks will, just skip to another state if they have the money to do so. It's the poor women who are the ones stuck. Now, with these current mandates, Biden just rolled out, it's get the vaccine or get a new job. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, that's not really feasible. These mandates are going to disproportionately affect poor people of color who really value their bodily autonomy, and they're the ones being told they either do what the government says with their bodies or lose their jobs. So you might say, well, but public health is different. This is a virus that's spreading, and you don't have the right to spread it to me. This is what Massachusetts argued during their time of the smallpox outbreak. Now, the smallpox fatality rate was between 15 and 30%. There was a real desire by the community and the individual to not get infected. The virus had been around for hundreds of years with various different types of inoculation that had been tried. The Chinese actually figured out that if you expose a person to a small amount of the virus, they could end up with a mild infection, and that would give them a 1 to 2% chance of death rather than 30%. And then in the late 1700s, a man named Dr. Edward Jenner discovered that you could instead infect a person with cowpox and get the same results. The person would get a mild illness and end up immune to smallpox. But immunity to the virus is the key. Smallpox vaccines, like measles, polio, and other vaccines, cause a person to no longer become infected and stop the spread of the virus dead in its tracks. Now, this is how we have justified mandatory vaccinations for children in this country. The COVID vaccines, however, are not stopping the spread. We hoped that they would. Early reports claimed that they did. Then we hoped they at least would significantly stop the spread. But with the number of breakthrough cases we're seeing in places like Israel, Iceland, Massachusetts, we now know they do not. Even communities with extremely high vaccination rates, like private universities, which have mandated all students and staffs be vaccinated, are scrambling because of current outbreaks. Rice University, Duke, Chapman University of Delaware, Connecticut College, all of these universities have vaccination rates among the students and staff that's above 90%, some as high as 98%. Nonetheless, they are experiencing outbreaks. Now, if the vaccine doesn't stop the spread, what justification do we have for these mandates? We know the vaccines are helping people who are vulnerable, who are in vulnerable categories, stay out of the hospitals and morgues. So it makes more sense to encourage those in the most vulnerable categories to get the vaccine and then donate the rest to the poor countries who haven't been able to even begin vaccinating their elderly. This makes the most sense than forcing healthy young populations with very little risk of hospitalization and death into giving up their bodily autonomy. Our history as a nation isn't so great when it comes to giving the people freedom over our bodies. Our nation has struggled with this concept since its inception. It's important we question and have these debates. When should the government be allowed to control our bodies, and when should they not? Is there ever a time when it's okay? What level of severity and proof of necessity do they need to prove to us in order to justify ripping away our rights? So, Ryan, I'll ask you about this. So COVID has a current death rate of 0.5%, which is much different than smallpox at 15 to 30%. And that 0.5%, by the way, is overall. We do know that for younger people, it's much, much lower. It obviously gets much higher as you get into the elderly population. It can go up to 14% for those who are above the age of 80. So what justification do we have at this point to continue these vaccine mandates when we know it is not stopping the spread?
Well, a 0.5% death rate can still mean 10,000 people died last week. And the vaccines, though, are actually effective. So you talked about the outbreak at Duke, for instance. That's almost exclusively an outbreak among the unvaccinated.
No, it isn't. It's 2% of the unvaccinated. No, 2% right. of those who have been infected are unvaccinated in that outbreak.
8 cases. Eight total
cases out of 345. So after 8 cases
is not an outbreak. That's
no. They had 345 that were diagnosed with COVID, and of those, 8 were unvaccinated. They had a 2% unvaccinated rate in the outbreak.
No. 8 were vaccinated. 8 of those were vaccinated. 8 were vaccinated, and none of those 8 went to the hospital.
That isn't accurate.
We can check, maybe the control room can check that. Check the Duke
They're checking on it right now.
Yeah, but I think more broadly, I think you make an interesting point, and I have seen people. I have seen people who are speaking up on behalf of the unvaccinated, referring to them as among this kind of marginalized or discriminated against community. And I do think there's something very American about that. Like we really enjoy this like oppression Olympics here in the United States, and I do think it's over the top to compare the unvaccinated to slavery or to eugenics or to victims of other types of discrimination or oppression. You know, they're making a choice not to become vaccinated, and they want the full ability to participate in public activity, and that's completely different than I think all of these other types of discriminations.
Well, the element of this that really infuriates me is when Biden implemented or he announced his federal vaccine mandate, and for companies, by the way, with employees over 100, and also all federal employees, what infuriates me about this is he is citing the authority of OSHA, of freaking OSHA. It's outrageous that he is giving, like, that's what, when you want to talk about sort of like the dissolution of our rights, the fact that he's citing emergency powers from the Department of Labor's OSHA agency to implement a mandate this vast and sweeping, it speaks to, I think, the latent power of our federal bureaucracy to eat away at our rights. And I think, you can have these conversations about localities, you can have these conversations, so like school boards mandating certain vaccinations, okay, states doing it, okay, the federal government under the authority of an agency in the Department of Labor run by unelected people, I think that is just completely outrageous, and that's what really gets me in the context of Kim's argument about the power to control people's bodily autonomy. The fact that the President of the United States is just sort of citing OSHA I think that is just completely outrageous.
Probably will get struck down. We'll
right,
see.
because it seems like OSHA should really only be regulating your workplace, right? And so the vaccine you carry with you 24/7. So I think there's a really good argument to make that OSHA is overstepping its bounds. You're not at work 24/7. They can, I think, mandate like protective gear or wearing masks and whatnot, but to mandate a vaccine, I think you make a really good point, Emily.
So what's most terrifying to me, I actually have a piece on the Federalist on this today, is that I don't know that OSHA is technically overstepping its boundaries because Congress has delegated a truly ridiculous amount of power to OSHA. If you look at the legislation that OSHA was established with, it does delegate just a stupid amount of power to them. And so I think there's good legal arguments on both sides of it. But what is actually particularly terrifying is that OSHA might have this power that is unconstitutional, in my opinion, but that was sort of constitutionally delegated towards it. And it'll be interesting to sort of follow that case.
And so some stats from the control room. So eight people were unvaccinated. A majority of the people were asymptomatic. So as of August 30th, 98% of students and 92% of employees were fully vaccinated, according to university press release. Michael Schoenfeld, Vice President of Public Affairs and Government Relations, wrote in an email to the Chronicle in late August that, quote, the majority of individuals who have had positive tests have been fully vaccinated. But if most of them were asymptomatic and they're just doing like random testing to find out whether there are breakthrough cases, but nobody's dying and nobody's going to the hospital and nobody's getting sick, how are people using that as evidence that the vaccine doesn't work?
No, I think you're confusing it. I think that those of us who say that it should be a personal choice, we're saying it does work, obviously, to stop. I mean, we're seeing that data. We can't deny that data. It works. If you are in a vulnerable category, if you really fear for your the severity of COVID, you think you might end up in the hospital, you should really consider this. I'm not going to say you should do it or shouldn't. It's not my decision to interfere with you and your doctor, but the difference is the mandates are, okay, if I get the vaccine, then I can't spread it to you. But we're not seeing that actually be realistic. So it really should remain, and what my argument is that it should remain a personal decision that you make to keep yourself safe. You're not going to keep other people safe from you, but you very well might lessen your chance of going to the hospital and ending up sick. And that is something, that's a message I feel like people really need to hear, because my worry is people are getting this idea that if they're vaccinated, they're safe. They can go around grandma. And I'm saying, no, you cannot. And that is dangerous to think you can, to think that you're not carrying the virus and you might not infect your grandmother. You might. And now we know that these vaccines are wearing off a bit, and grandma got it first, right? She got it back in maybe January, February. She might be very vulnerable. And so people need to know about this so that they can make educated decisions on how they behave in their life, and also educated, informed consent decisions about their own personal medical decisions.
But here's one more layer to that. If the chance of getting infection isn't zero, and you're obviously 100% correct that it's not zero, you can still get infected and you can still spread it even if you're vaccinated. But the chance that you'll get infected is significantly lower. So
we don't really know that yet. We don't know that yet. It's still a little too early. I think there's maybe some early ideas that it might help slow the spread, but they've said, like back in February, March, and April, they said you won't get it. And then they started to say, okay, well, you can, but maybe it'll be lessened. And we're not really seeing evidence of that when we look at like Iceland's data, for example. So we don't really know yet.
Let me try one pro-vaccination argument out on you and see how you think this one flies.
I think I'm a game show.
So let's think of this as a national mobilization. I don't like to think of everything in terms of war, but some type of national mobilization where we are confronting an enemy that is at this point killing 10,000 people a week in the United States.
Yeah, he got back from dropping everything off. Yeah, these days, Okay. Cool. We'll see you then. All right. Okay. Love you, babe. We'll be back to the building in a second.